Okay, hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about something that was discussed in the chapter where it was just kind of brief, but social work and mental health. So, first of all, my why. I think it's pretty obvious, there's a lot of relevance. Um, Mental health is something that is important for everyone. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking, oh, well, only if someone has a mental illness do we need to talk about mental health, but that's definitely not the case. I really think that there should be more of an emphasis on holistic wellness, so body, mind, spirit, everything coming together to make someone happy and stay healthy. And it's also just something universal, right? It applies to everyone. We need to just take care of ourselves. So, I read an article from a social work journal, um, and it was kind of interesting because in the social work community, like everybody knows, mental health is something that we talk about. Um, and we'll get into how that's different later, but I just thought it was interesting. It went through all of it, and it was essentially just saying, hey, social workers, there's a lot that you're going to have to do to help those that either struggle with their mental health or are working to improve it, however it may be. But one of the things that I thought was especially interesting was be careful in how you define it, because there's so many different ways. And well, not that there are so many different ways, but there's lots of ways that people do. um, and just making sure that we are talking to clients and seeking to help them in an appropriate way. Um, I really like the quote that I read from the article that says, the dependent variable in the equation is mental status. Um, and that's that sociological perspective coming through of looking at it as independent variable and dependent variable. Um, Saying that our mental status can depend on a lot of things. There's a lot of independent variables that factor into our well-being and into our health. And I like how they said mental status. It's okay to have a different mental status throughout different points of your life, throughout different days of the week, and throughout different moments of the day. Um, and so I just thought that was interesting, of reminding ourselves of there's a lot that filters into people's lives. And as social workers, we need to be especially aware of that. As is with any case, making sure that we help the person the best way we can means understanding that it's not just so straightforward A, B, black and white. Um, which kind of leads me into them saying, pay attention to individual cases. There is no one size fits all when it comes to working with mental health, especially, with different clients coming in. It would make the profession maybe easier in a sense, um, but it's very dangerous to kind of blanket it and just say, well, there is a one size fits all, because that's not how it works. The other thing that they mentioned was making sure you set up good boundaries. Um, not letting yourself kind of seep into other people's realities, as well as not taking home work with you, which I thought was good. And then just context, like contextualizing um, the situation that you're working with, helping clients to put it into perspective of, you feel this way because of this, not because, there's, I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this. Helping them to see it within their environment and to make those connections, as opposed to, you know, self blame and internalizing a lot of unhealthy traits that could arise with this topic. So, I also read a news article, NBC News. Um, and it's not funny, but it was just a little bit funny, kind of their language, because what they were saying is, we are so shocked that this study shows that teens have had mental health struggles even before the pandemic, as if the pandemic was the only thing that affected people's lives and their mental health. I don't know, but um, it was a good article. It was talking about, like I said, surprising rates of anxiety and depression. And the study that they cited said that 1 out of 4 teens, I think they had it aged between 13 and 18, if I remember correctly, considered suicide. And 1 out of 5 reported symptoms of depression. And this is serious because kind of how the article was saying is this is a big deal, which is good to say that, but also maybe we should have known this already. It is a big deal, and I don't think that it's anything that we necessarily should be saying that we are surprised by, but rather saying, okay, this is the realistic number, and this is what we're looking at, and this is what we're working with. How can we help? What can we be doing to be better, to lower these rates of concerns and mental stress that our teens are facing? I think there's a lot going on. They've cited the pandemic, that they're surprised that this is even before the pandemic, but yeah, the pandemic definitely weighed into it. And just everyday life growing up, being a teenager is such a hard time. So anyways, it was a good news article because the message that they were putting forth was, are you aware of this? And I major in sociology, so it comes up a lot and you're kind of like, yeah, I am aware of it, but not everybody is. And so I think it was good that they were, doing their best to put those numbers out there so that we can really get a grasp on, like I mentioned, what the demographics of the world really truly are looking like. Okay, and then from the NSAW, social and political action. So this part is just talking about how social workers have a responsibility sort of towards the greater good, and just saying like, we need to promote an environment, a society that is welcoming to everyone and that doesn't discriminate, and people aren't going to be judged or have different opportunities based off of their different experiences. And it included mental health. And so, I just think of like people that struggle with depression or anxiety or ADHD or whatever it may be, could definitely use someone in their corner to stand up for them and make sure that they are seeing just as much of an equal opportunity as anybody else. Okay, my comparison. So from the two, the main thing that we noticed is this is definitely something that needs to be addressed. There was a time where it wasn't talked about at all. It was very stigmatized, and things are getting better. But I think we can even see, just like how I mentioned earlier, the difference of the social work article and the news article of things are getting better because we're talking about it, but also why isn't this more of an open discussion? Why isn't this happening more? One difference that I saw was with a social worker article, with them having already established that mental health needs to be taken care of and needs to be emphasized, they have resources. It almost sounded like they're more prepared because they've been aware of it for longer. So instead of saying, what do we do, they say, as a social worker, make sure you're setting boundaries and make sure you're encouraging people and make sure you're making sure they feel like they're empowered. And just kind of that difference that I noticed between the two of what do we do versus here's what we do. They also shared the similarity in the idea that there are ongoing trends. It's something that we've needed to be aware of for a long time. Both articles state that, both articles show evidence of that. This is nothing new. And then the biggest difference is I touched on this already a little bit, but activeness versus surprise, because I think the real world, like the news article world, um, they aren't passive. And as a society, we aren't passive, but we are kind of self-absorbed in the sense that if somebody was like, "Hey, I'm really struggling with my mental health," we would be like, "What? No way." Well, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, that's kind of the what happens, is because we aren't really, focused so much on other people. Whereas in the social work community, it's so much about giving back. It's so much about being aware of other people's needs, um, and seeing what's going on versus day to day life. It's a little bit more surprising because we're less invested in the lives of other people. Okay. And then finally, my question is, what prevents mental health from being addressed more thoroughly or coming up in conversation more often and more naturally than it is today? And there's my references. Thanks.